This video is being made for my business communication class for Chapter 6, Revising Business Messages. We start this section by reviewing Guffey's 3x3 writing process. I think it's a very good, sound approach to addressing any kind of communication, and it consists of three major parts: pre-writing or planning for writing or for communication, doing the actual writing, including, of course, the drafting of the message, and revising. The pre-writing or planning includes analyzing your message, analyzing your audience, your receiver, how anticipating how you think they will receive the message. You know, it's really important to determine whether they're going to be glad to receive the message or whether maybe they're not, or if it's a persuasive message, because that will determine, among other things, the overall structure, whether you take a direct approach or an indirect approach. And of course, adapting the message to your audience by choosing the right channel. For instance, whether it should be an email or a formal letter or maybe just a phone conversation. And always trying to put yourself in the reader's shoes, thinking, how will they receive this? How will they understand it? How will they accept my message? And that's what we call taking the U view. Remember, the U view is always a positive thing. It's respecting the receiver and recognizing that it's your job as the communicator, as the sender, to craft the message in such a way that it is properly received and most easily understood by the receiver. The writing, of course, is always important. This is where we covered a bit of review of grammar, and dangling misplaced participles and run-on sentences and proper punctuation and things like that. It involves doing research and to actually, since you know what the topic is, make sure that you've got all the information you need, that your message is going to be well organized, and of course the actual drafting or composition of the message is part of this section here. And then revising the message, reading through it again. Sometimes if you got the luxury of time, putting it aside so that you can come back to it with more of a fresh set of eyes, to read it or to consider the message and how, again, see if it really does meet the needs of the occasion and of your reader. Proofing, we talk about in this section. As a matter of fact, section 3 here is all from chapter 6. As a matter of fact, chapter 4 is pre-writing or planning for writing. Chapter 5 is doing the actual writing itself, and chapter 6, which is what this video is mainly about, is concerned with writing. Hopefully you'll remember that, strange as it may seem, the lion's share of the work is going to take place in revising. Pre-writing would generally consume about 25% of the time devoted to a particular message. Writing itself, another 25%, and the revising, about 50%. So let's talk more about pre-writing. Analyzing, that is defining your purpose, selecting the most appropriate form, that is channel, and visualizing the audience, putting yourself in their shoes and trying to anticipate how they are going to receive the message. And then, of course, adapting, considering ways to shape the message to make it most appealing or beneficial for the reader, and choosing language and choosing, for instance, the right type of vocabulary so that it is accessible to and appropriate for the reading abilities of the receiver. Writing, again, there's the three sections to that, just to review. Collecting data formally and informally. This is where we talked about brainstorming and brain writing and those sorts of things. Organizing, sometimes you may use a formal outline and you'll select the overall strategy. Writing a first draft, preferably on a computer, because it's so much easier to revise and even to share that with others who may be part of your a team working on a particular document. And then revising, this section here that we're getting to, revising for clarity, for tone, for conciseness and vigor, in other words, liveliness, and to improve readability. And of course, it's always important to proofread. No matter how much care you put into writing and revising, a careless oversight, before you hit the send button can result in some real embarrassment, and maybe someone who doesn't give your message maybe its due because it doesn't. They figure that not much care has gone into it. If there are some obvious typos or other problems. And evaluating, asking yourself how successful it is. You know, one of the things I've said before in class, and just about any endeavor, is having a clear picture of what success looks like. And it's true with any communication, as well as any project or any effort that you put forth in a class or on the job. Revising for clarity, conciseness, and readability. What we're going to do here is actually cover these various topics to talk about what it means to keep it simple, to keep it conversational, to remove opening fillers, eliminate redundancies, reduce compound prepositions, and purge empty words, to kick the noun habit, dump trite, quote, business phrases, to develop parallelism, apply graphic highlighting, and to measure readability. So the following section of this video and of the notes that accompany it are going to address these issues. First of all, keep it simple. This is number one on your notes. I realized as I was making this video, or at least reading through the notes before making this video, that we're in section 2 now, where it says revising for clarity, conciseness, and readability. And the very first point, number 1, is to keep it simple. And under that, it doesn't show up here, but it should be right under number 1, it should say avoid indirect pompous language. Pompous means impressive sounding language, haughty sounding language. And so you can see here's an example of what how someone might use words that are more highfalutin or impressive sounding, and sentence construction that is not very clear. When, of course, in business, we value economy of effort, we respect other people's time, and that's where conciseness comes from. Don't be stingy with your words. Don't use 2 words when a better chosen 1 word will do. So avoid pompous, impressive sounding language. Secondly, keep it conversational. In this case, you see our accounting department takes this opportunity to inform you that we have credited your account for the aforementioned sum. Conversational, we've credited your account for $100. Next, remove opening fillers. You can see an opening filler here. There are any number of these things, but notice here there are 4 new menu items we must promote. Why don't you just say we must promote 4 new menu items? Look for ways to cut out unnecessary words, those that really don't add any value. Eliminate redundancies. Redundancies simply mean, in this case, phrases, collections of words that really don't say anything or add anything, or let's say that together. Sorry, I'm not going to go back and redo this. Collect together. You could just say assemble or collect or contributing factor. It's a factor. Personal opinion. How about in my opinion? I get tickled sometimes at somebody that always says, in my honest opinion. Tell me when are you going to tell me when you've got a dishonest opinion? Why not just say in my opinion? Perfectly clear, again, you want to make something clear. There's no need to say perfectly or crystal clear, or even to say very. Try to look for ways to cut very out of your conversation if you want to save some time. Reduce compound prepositions. Here's a few that may not be ones that we have you've seen very much, but believe me, sometimes people use those. At such time as we are able to pay the bill, we will do. Why don't you say when? At which time, same thing, when. Due to the fact that, just use because. And inasmuch as, reduce to because. In other words, there are some much more widely used words like when and because that serve the purpose of some phrases that sound impressive but just take up unnecessary space. Purge empty words. To purge means, of course, just to get rid of them. We see 3 statements here. As for the area of athletic shoes, the degree of profit sagged. This is to inform you that we have a toll-free service line. Not all students who are registered will attend. That this is to inform you is one of this email will so-and-so. I'm writing this email because so-and-so. Well, why don't you just get to the point? It's obviously you're writing an email. Now, tell me what the purpose is. Here's a way that, as you can see, you can cut out some unnecessary and unhelpful excess baggage, and therefore to shorten the sentences. so that you end up with something that's a lot more direct and not full of, as it says, empty or unhelpful words. Kick the noun habit. Here's an example. We must conduct an investigation of all parking violations before we can give consideration to your fine. Well, how about if we say we must investigate all parking violations before we can consider your fine? So one might say we must conduct a performance evaluation. We must perform an evaluation of something. Why don't you say we must evaluate? We must conduct a performance evaluation. We must evaluate the performance of, and so on. Look for ways to use, see, verbs are more active typically, and when you're doing something that gets attention. So why convert that into a noun and make it sleepy when you can use a verb form? Dump trite business phrases. You see some of these things. Pursuant to your request, enclosed, please find a job application. As you requested, we have enclosed a job application. Develop parallelism, something we talked about even in class today. Notice the series here. When we talk about parallelism, we're generally speaking about a series of actions or phrases and how it is that we can achieve balance so that it's easier to see the relationship between those phrases. We can collect information, store it, and later it can be updated. Well, instead, how about saying we can collect, store, and update information? Use numbered lists for high skim value. Once again, in class today, I mentioned this notion that if you've got a list of things, generally speaking, if you've got more than three of a series, whether it's steps someone is to perform, or it's 4, 5, 6 things that you want to warn people about. Let's say you want to bring to their attention with regard to the parking problem at work or at school or whatever. Generally speaking, if you've got a list of only 3, you may be able to handle that in a paragraph and people can take those things in. But if you've got more than 3 items, it's generally better to either enumerate those or to use some kind of a bullet points. And I mentioned, of course, today, if there is significance to the order or the steps. For instance, in this example here, you've got 4 steps that should be that should be followed. Select a document, select a folder, provide a file name, click Save. The fact that you give it that you enumerate these, that you give it a numbered order here, just emphasizes the fact that there are steps to be followed here. If, though, as I was mentioning in class today, let's say that you're raising funds or asking for donations for a homeless shelter or for a church food bank or something like that, and you really want to just list some items that are needed, maybe items that you're short on, you might provide a bulleted list listing all those items. If, in fact, though, you have a priority, let's say you're especially short with some of these items, then you may want to list those first and assign numbers to them. Here's an example where you've got 4 items here, but they're not necessarily, there's not a priority of these items, unless you decide to tell people that there is. Add headings for visual impact and readability. You can use different font colors, sizes, different types of fonts, underlining. All of those things can help to emphasize and make more understandable whatever information it is that you are trying to share. Okay, we're getting into proofreading, and I'll stop the video right now and pick up on part 2.